Hi, I'm Jim Painter. Thanks for coming to our Wellness for the Whole Man workshop. And today we're going to talk about food, but we have a number of us that are going to be speaking throughout this session. Here's my credentials. This is me. Well, that's what I looked like back in 1972 when I had hair. And this is important because in the early 70s, we're going to talk about that in just a moment, this is what I looked like as a college student. Then I became a grad student. And this is me, I'm on the left. And those pants are really my pants. And so that's what I looked like as a grad student. And then I became a respectable nutritionist. Now, that's important because what I'm going to talk about first is in the early 70s, we had a lot of things wrong. Now, here's really my speaker credentials, and I've been a professor at University of Illinois for 10 years, at Eastern Illinois for 12 years, and now at University of Texas. Before that, I was with Marriott Corporation for 10 years. And when Oral Roberts, does anybody remember Oral Roberts? When he opened his City of Faith Hospital, I was the first nutritionist in 1981. And so I've been doing this for a long time, and our opinions have changed. Right now, I work with Chick-fil-A, Sun-Made Raisins, the Dairy Council, Treetop Apples, the Sorghum Council. A variety of companies have me giving talks for them on a weekly basis around the country. And then there's a lot of people that have paid my honorariums. I say all this because you need to know where I'm coming from, because everybody is somewhat jaded by what they do. And so I work for all of these different companies in addition to being a professor. I've wanted to put this together for many years. It's an outline of what I think is wellness for the whole man. And I'm going to talk about eating correctly, but we're talking about spirit, soul, and body. We're going to talk about all of it throughout this 6 sessions. And I'm going to start with food, and then I'm going to talk about eating mindfully. Have you noticed that we're overweight in this country? Yeah. And so we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about what do we eat then? How we're supposed to eat, and then I'm going to talk about mindfulness, and my wife's going to come in and talk a little bit about that too. How do we handle our mind? And then Dr. Rama is going to come in and talking about exercising, moving, breathing, and then Pastor Happy Layman is going to come in and talk about the spirit. All right. So here's the text that I have read for 40 years, and it's Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians 5:23. Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you entirely, your whole spirit, soul, and body. I must admit, I really don't still have a clear, after 40 years, understanding of the soul and the spirit. I do understand the body because I live in it. And so we're going to start with that. And he's saying that we should be preserved complete in all 3 areas. 1 Corinthians 6:19, do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit? Yikes. The Holy Spirit lives in here. And so I need to take care of this because it's where God's Spirit lives. And so that's kind of a big responsibility. Sometimes we as Christians want to take care of all kinds of things, but not our bodies. I think we want to, but I think we just don't do it very well. So we're going to talk about how we eat in this first session. Timothy says, for bodily disciplines of little profit. Some people have quoted this saying, I don't need to take care of my body. But listen to what it says. It's of little profit. Why? Because godliness is profitable for all things, since it holds promise for the present and also for the life to come. Well, yeah, godliness is really important because it's not just here, it lasts for eternity. So it is more important. But the body is what we live in when we're here, and we let it go when we go on to eternity. So it is. Compared to godliness, our body's not that important. But it is really important if you want to walk from here to there, because it carries you there. And you want to keep it in good shape, because the better shape we keep it in, the better we can live and fulfill God's will in our lives for the entire part of our life. So that's why we're talking about this today. And then 3 John 2, beloved, I pray in all respects that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. Well, our soul's number one. Our soul needs to prosper. It does. But in addition to that, he wants us to be in good health just as our soul is prospering. So spiritual things are more important, but the body is what we live in, and God says it's important too. So whatever we do, whatever we eat, what drink, whatever we do all things to the glory of God. That's our goal. We want to eat for God's glory. I've been a nutritionist for 40 years. You know the hardest thing for me to do for God? To eat right. Because, there's lots of things out there I want to eat that are not the best things for me. So do all things for the glory of God. That's what we're going to study today. That's why we're doing this, to be able to glorify God. Now, we have said some things wrong over the past few years. I want to straighten those out first, because what do we focus on? Do you know if we focus on the wrong thing, we miss the right thing and we fail? Because if you're not concentrating on the main thing, then you miss. And so we have concentrated on fat. When I ask people, what are you going to do to live healthier? You know what they say? I'm going to eat less fat. I'm going to have less fat in my diet. We taught that so long, so wrong. That's what everybody thinks. And then, so fat's not bad. We're going to mention that briefly. Cholesterol isn't the issue. There is a terrible trio out there of added sugar, trans fat, and highly processed foods. Those are really things we need to watch. But really, the focus should be on what we do eat and not what we don't eat. So we'll get to that in a minute. First things first. Here is Ansel Keys in 1963. He came out with a fat theory of heart disease, and he convinced the world that it was true, but it wasn't. And so this is 63. Remember the picture of me in 74? That's when all of this stuff started. The first guidelines came out in the 70s, and I ate it up, and I taught fat's bad for 10 years. But then we found out that here's Time magazine in 2014, eat butter. Scientists labeled the enemy why we were wrong. We were. So the first thing I have to do is apologize for lying to people throughout the 70s and 80s. I mean, I was telling people what my professors told me. It just wasn't right. Now, why wasn't it right? I'm just going to give you 2 slides on this. I taught this graph forever. This says that as fat goes from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40%, that risk and deaths of heart disease go up. Look at that graph. It's a perfect correlation. As fat goes up, heart disease goes up. I taught this graph. This graph was made back in 1952. It was the main graph in all of the guidelines in the 70s, and I taught this graph as an evangelist against fat. I did it fervently, because look at it. Fat's bad. Well, you can imagine my surprise when I found out there weren't 7 countries. This 7-country study was given all over the world. There were actually 22 countries. And then here's all 22 countries. What happened to that perfect line? Where did it go? It's kind of all over the place. And so this graph was done in 1957. It's just that nobody ever pushed it and looked at it. And so what you can tell from this graph, these countries, United States, Australia, all of the English-speaking countries, they eat a lot of fat and they have a lot of heart disease. Really what this graph tells you is it's dangerous to speak English. Because if you know Spanish, you want to start. Because that's what this graph says. You look at these countries down here, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands. Wait a minute, they're eating 40% fat too. But they're not dying of heart disease, hardly at all. Well, that's not fair. It's an American tradition. If you eat fat, you're supposed to die of heart disease. They're not. Why? Well, they're on a Mediterranean diet. Well, wait a minute. Those are Nordic countries. They're probably not on. They're eating sausage and whole dairy and what? So that's a Nordic diet full of sausage and meat. So we had it so wrong for so long, and all I can do is apologize and do penance. That's why I do this talk, because I'm doing penance to straighten out what I said wasn't right for 10, 20 years. All right, so fat's not the issue, but what did we create? We created SnackWells. It's low fat. I was so deceived as a young man that I fed this to my children. I knew it was only sugar and white flour, which I knew was bad, but I knew fat was so bad that this was okay. And I thought, how could I have done that? So has anyone ever seen this box? Can I see your hands? A couple of you? Okay, this was the main thing that came out in SnackWells, and I could eat an entire box in one sitting. Because since there was no fat, they had them cradled in little plastic gloves to hold them. And there's only 6 6 cookies in that whole container. All right, so we created snack wells. So fat, this is a hard one. Fat's not bad. I went to Jimmy John's just about, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and I said, give me number 12 on which leave off the mayo. And then I thought, why am I leaving off the mayo? It's vinegar. Well, that's a health food, isn't it? It's got oil in it. Well, that's good. It has eggs. Well, they're really good for you. I said, well, bummer. Double the mayo. Just make it sloppy and juicy. I want the mayo oozing out all over the place. Because I had been living by this paradigm, and it's not true. So the first thing is fat's not bad. Different fats are better for you than others, but fat in general isn't bad. So, and I don't have time to get into the different kinds of fat. But then cholesterol. I taught entire classes for an hour long on where to find cholesterol in the diet and get rid of it, because it's bad. But now we have the Heart Association, the dietary guidelines, the most recent meta-analysis. They all say not enough evidence to say it's even bad. Might it have some problems? Yes, it could. But really, is it bad? Probably not. I got a banana once that had a sticker on it that said cholesterol-free. Honestly, really, and so we just went nutsy with this. I sent a student out a few years ago to find out where this came from, and this is what she found. If you want to study a human, what animal would you pick? Well, a rabbit, of course, because we're so similar. You've seen those hungry rabbits chasing down a water buffalo and nibbling it to death? Well, no, because they're herbivores. So you take this little rabbit, it's an herbivore, it's never seen cholesterol. You give it 100 eggs worth of cholesterol a day, and by the way, rabbits eat their own poo. What a great substitute for us. It's not even like us, because generally we don't eat poo. I say generally because one day we're walking into our son's house, and he's screaming, the baby's screaming, picking up the dog. The little 1-year-old had just taken a little piece of poo and put it into his mouth and was chewing on it. So I had to pick him up and pull the poo out from his 2 teeth. And then his mother walks in the door and says, what are you feeding the children? Well, nothing really. He did eat poo, though. And so I say that we generally don't eat poo. And so we have this rabbit study. This rabbit study was done in 1912. It's been around for 100 years, and that's the best I can find that got us off into this whole thing of cholesterol. So fat and cholesterol aren't the issue. What is a problem? Added sugar. Why is it a problem? This shows as you add more added sugar, the more 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, the nutrients go down. Potassium just starts to plummet. You add more sugar, you lose nutrients. And so that's why added sugar is an issue. It's not just potassium, calcium's the same thing. And so what's the deal? This is quartiles of how much we consume. So these people here consume very little, and they're rated at 1, their risk of death. And so here's the next 20%, the next 20%, the top 20% of added sugar consumers have a 2.5 times greater risk of coronary heart disease. So that's why, that's the issue. We don't want a lot of it because it takes away nutrients, and it really is correlated with heart disease. This guy, 1964, John Yudkin, he's a professor in England. He wrote a book called Pure, White, and Deadly. And he was a professor at St. Mary's College. And he says, Yudkin suggests that sugar may be the main causative factor in heart disease. National levels of consumption of fat and sugar are closely similar. So the statistics relating fat to heart disease may only express an inverse or indirect relationship, and it's really the causal relationship is sugar. He wrote that in 1964. When he wrote it, his career was destroyed. He never ended up anywhere again. He couldn't publish anything because he was going against Ansel Keys and the fat theory of the day. And so he was just squished. So sugar has been the problem forever. This is a donut. And so it's white flour and white sugar and fat, deep fat fried in fat, covered with creamy sugar and sprinkled with sugar, So the thing is, I'm not as opposed to that. Everybody knows it's not good for you, so you shouldn't eat a lot of it. Okay, well, I get that. But added sugar is not always bad. When does it become bad? This, we all agree, is probably not very nutritious and very good for you, All right, but when does added sugar become a problem? Here's oatmeal with none. And then you have Cheerios and they have 10%. Well, that's okay. I mean, 10%. Cheerios are pretty good. They're mostly whole grain. But then you go to multigrain, it's 20, Honey Nut, it's 30, Fruit Loops, it's 40, Apple Jacks, it's 50. So half of what you're eating in Apple Jacks is sugar. All right, so somewhere along the line there, we went bad. I don't know exactly when. Obviously, oatmeal is good. You add a little bit of sugar to something like Cheerios, and kids eat them. Kids won't put sugar on it. They just take it for what it is, and they eat Cheerios. It's like God's gift to children. It's got 10% added sugar. It's all whole grains. But where if you take something like shredded wheat, shredded wheat. You put milk on it. You wait till the next day. You eat it. It's still scratchy because it's dry. You have to do something to it to get it to be consumable. But Cheerios aren't. So I don't know where the break is, but added sugar is a problem. And the less you have, the better. It's better just to eat oatmeal. All right, then. So what do we do about this? We love sweets. We want to eat sugar, The thing my students and I have been doing is taking out the sugar and putting in fruit purees, dried fruit. The fruit purees have lots of color and flavor and aroma. They add texture to it. They have lots of nutrients in there. And we also substitute erythritol and stevia for sugar. I think those are fine. And we can talk more about that if you would like. But this is what we need to do. We want sugar. It's hard to say, I'm never going to eat sugar again. And so we need the sweetness. Why don't we get sweetness with whole foods that God created in the first place? Here's my first example. This is an apple cinnamon Newton. It is made with some butter, apple flakes, egg yolks, vanilla, oat flour, salt. It has no white flour. It has no refined flour. It has no sugar. And I'm telling you that this apple Newton is extremely delicious and sweet. There's no sugar. And it's all whole foods. So we can do things like that. So my first thought in this series is eat whole foods. The way God made them, as best we can, eating whole foods. Now, I love pecan pie, but it's one big slab of sugar. And so I asked my students, is there a way we can make this where it's really good for us? And so sure enough, they came up with date paste and apple puree. So this entire filling, there's no sugar in there. It's all fruits. It's all dates and apples. And we feed this to people, this pecan pie, and it is absolutely delicious, but it has no added sugar. Isn't that amazing? So pecan pie. So my goal here is substitute sweet fruits into things in place of sugar is the goal. Now, in addition to sugar, in general, how should we eat? How do we eat healthy foods? We want to treat ourselves, but we want to be healthy at the same time. What do we do? Well, we have to find the sweet spot between the two. It has to be healthy by stealth, and it has to be sweet and tasty. What can we do to make foods look better, taste better? Well, they have to be healthy by stealth. If you tell someone, little Johnny, here's something that's good for you, they'll go, no way. I've heard you say that before. My students say that. This is healthy. No way, buddy. I know you, Doc. I'm not going to eat that. I've tasted it before, and it's horrible. Because we have this idea that healthy doesn't taste good. But it can. But it has to be by stealth. So how do we do this, health by stealth? Now, you look at these foods. Do you have to tell someone they're healthy? I mean, don't they look so good that you just want to eat them because they look so good? That's our goal. Make food look so good and taste so good, you eat it and make it healthy by stealth. That's the goal. That's been my goal for many decades now, making food that people want to eat. I don't tell them, eat this, it's healthy. That's a killer. Or say, this is low fat. Do you want to try some? This is low fat, low cholesterol, and low sodium. Come over to my house to eat. No, thank you. I think I'll stay home. And so the idea of telling people, just make it healthy, and make it healthy by stealth. So here's some things we can do to make things healthier. Here's salmon. Here's another salmon. This one's 500. This one's only 300 calories. And it's the same salmon. This has some markings on it, so we make it look a little nicer. This doesn't have the creamy sauce on it. It has a fruit chutney. Which one looks better? I mean, which one actually looks better? This one looks better. And so you don't have to tell someone, choose this one. It just looks better, and it tastes better. I like the idea of warm and cold together. I think it's a godly thing. My taste buds like it. I like Flaming Bananas Foster. You have ice cream, and when I make it for my students, it's a pound of butter, and it's a pound of brown sugar, and then it's some rum to flame it, and some banana liqueur to flavor it, and then you throw the bananas in there, and it's just a big bunch of sugar and fat. Well, my students found out, too, that they can take out the brown sugar and put in purees, like date paste. Grind up dates, put them in there. And then instead of the butter, we use coconut oil. We'll make the Flaming Bananas Foster without any fats, without any of those bad fats, without any sugar, and people love it. They just eat it down. So it's healthy by stealth. Same thing here. And then we like what we like to eat. We like fried. But do you know that when you eat something you like, at some point you get tired of it? I will get a milkshake at McDonald's, the big ones, and I'll drink half of it, and I'll be really satisfied. And then I'll drink 3/4 of it, and I'm really uncomfortable because I'm overfull. And then I get to the last bit, and I'm ready to throw up. But I keep eating it because I paid for it. And I'm going to eat the whole thing. But I get tired of it. I mean, even this, we like fried shrimp, but you get tired of eating fried shrimp. Variety is something we can throw in there to help ourselves eat better, and then make half of them grilled and half of them fried, and it goes from 7 down to 500 calories. You still get what you want, but you get variety, which we also like. We get tired of those things. So those are some ideas. Here's another one. A chocolate shake. This is made with a pasteurized egg, and they're out there in any store. You can find them. And it's made with cocoa powder, milk, and a half of an avocado. This turns out, if you put too much avocado, it turns into chocolate pudding, which is really good too. And so you have this wonderful avocado, and you have milk and cocoa powder, which is a health food. We'll talk about that in a lesson to come. And then 2 packets of Splenda as a sweetener, and you can put stevia, erythritol, whatever you want in there. And this is the most amazing health food, and it's a chocolate shake. When Rose's mom was getting along in years and she wouldn't eat much, we would take eggs and a tablespoon of whatever sweetener we had, and cocoa powder, and a little tiny bit of milk. We blended up to this thick, creamy shake, and she'd eat 2 bites, and I'm full. You can't be full. You've only had 2 bites. I'm full. Would you like a chocolate shake? Yes. Okay. And so we would make a chocolate shake for her, and she didn't realize she's getting eggs. She's getting all the protein she needs in this little tiny chocolate shake that we would make like this. So again, health by stealth. Here's a green bean casserole with 300 calories and lots of sodium in there, 2,600 milligrams of sodium in this big thing. And then here is a radicchio green bean salad, and it has 145 calories, and it has almost no sodium. There's things you can do to make things that you like better. Now, I love ice cream. I am pretty sure that when God made manna from heaven, it was a combination of peanut butter and chocolate. And I have no data for that, really. I just think it is, because I go to Cold Stone, I get ice cream with peanut butter sauce and chocolate sauce and Reese's peanut butter cups on there. It is truly heavenly. And so I like ice cream, but it's not the best thing for me. It's not bad, but it's not the best. And so you can see here, it's calories. It has a little bit of potassium. It has no fiber. You don't expect to have fiber in there. But I also like fruit smoothies. And so this has 16 grams of fiber. It has half the fiber you need all day in one smoothie. That's kind of amazing. And the calories, look at the sodium drops to almost nothing, and potassium is huge. And that's one of the things we need. Actually, high blood pressure is not so much too much sodium, but it's not enough potassium. And so when we get things like this that are full of potassium, then we're really getting all the things that we need. Now, I'm going to spend a little time here at the end of this talk with this cake. This is the quintessential health by stealth. This one day, I was in Florida at one of my students' house. She was making this for her parents and I, and she brought this little tort out. And I tried it, and I said, this is decadently, chocolatey, creamy, delicious. And she said, it has no white flour and no white sugar. I said, that's impossible. This is really good. And it's made with almond flour. So there's no flour in here at all. It's just all almonds. It's nuts. People say, I can't eat nuts. It hurts my teeth. Okay, but you can eat it in the form of a flour. You know, and so unsweetened coconut flakes, chopped up, cocoa powder, baking soda, a little salt, applesauce, apple flakes, a cup of raisins and date paste in there, some eggs, coconut oil, and vanilla. This is what I would want people to eat as an entree every day, nuts and dried fruit. It's amazing. So my students will come in and they'll say, "Where's that tort?" And I'll say, "You're a hospitality student. This is for a gluten-free study." And they say, "Yeah, it's so good, I want it." And I say, "It's gone." And then when they leave, I pull it out and I eat it for lunch. And I'll have just that for lunch. It's nuts and it's dried fruit, and it's full of, you'll find out in the coming talks that cocoa powder is actually good for you. We've already talked about eggs aren't bad for you. They're good for you too. And so this is a health food, a very healthy food. And has no sugar and no white flour. It is an entree masquerading as a dessert. That's what we need to do. And we can do that. It takes a little time, but you can make really healthy foods that taste really good. And this is the prime example. And we should be able to get some of these recipes out too, so you can see these. We might even post these somewhere. We'll see. So here's what we talked about today. Fat and cholesterol aren't bad. They're just not. We need to get that out of our brain. Because when you focus on something that's not the main point, you're either miss out or you die. You know, and so you want to keep the main thing, and this is not it. So eat, if you want to eat, when I get a steak, I can just trim off the fat and eat the fat and leave the meat. No, I really don't do that. But now I do eat the fat. I mean, when I get a steak, I eat the fat. I mean, I ate more dry hamburger in my life. Gag you, stick in the throat, dry hamburger that didn't have any fat in it. I ate grilled vegetables for decades because they were good for me. And now I tell people, make a good cream sauce and sauce it up. Just cover those vegetables with sauce and get people to eat vegetables. I mean, it's hard. Rose's mom would make a whole head of cauliflower, and she'd put mayonnaise and cheese on it, and she'd cook it in the oven as this big head of cauliflower. And I'm telling you that people devoured that head of cauliflower because it was covered with cheese. Everything is better with cheese. And so if you want people to eat it, cheese sauce it. So fat's not bad, cholesterol's not bad. Eat less, low fiber, highly refined foods. Do you know that half of our diet, 50% of our diet is highly refined? And that means it has colors, flavors, textures to make it look like something it's not. Now, everything is processed somewhat. Canned fruits, they're fine. I mean, dried fruits, you dry them in the sun, you wash them off, you package them. They're processed, but they're lightly processed. And so we need to get away from so many of these when you can have things like that decadent chocolate cake. And then use fruit to replace sugar. For today and tomorrow, replace it. Use stealth health and eat whole foods. So on this first lecture, the main thing we want to focus on is eat whole foods the way God made them. Which ones? You know, I don't really care as much. That's not the point. You can be an Eskimo living in northern Canada and having seal meat and seal blubber for breakfast and whale meat and whale blubber for lunch and have a blubber smoothie in the afternoon and be healthy. You can be in India and you can eat no fat at all because you don't have any, but you're eating roots and twigs and berries and you're eating whole foods. Or you can be a Maasai Indian and all you do is take milk and you poke your cow and you bleed it and you make my favorite, warm blood and milk smoothie that you just drink down. I know, it is a little nauseating, but they're healthy too. I mean, eat whole foods is the goal of this lecture. And then we do have some resource materials. We have my book. We're going to talk about that in the next lecture. And then Dr. Rama has his. Rosie has one of hers. And then Joyce Meyer's, probably the book that meant the most to me in life is Joyce Meyer's book, The Battlefield of the Mind. How do you handle your mind? We'll talk about that in the third or fourth lecture. And then The Gospel in 10 Words by Paul Ellis. There's some resources. All right? That's the end of our first lecture. I hope you come back for future lectures. Thanks.